Chat! What is up, everybody? Welcome back in. Oh, I was going to do a little bit. Oh, I messed it up. I messed it up already, chat. We're doing a new thing. We're trying something new today, which is a Wednesday show. We very rarely stream on Wednesday, but I have my little friend here. Let's get him in the corner. That should be good. Here we go. All right. Here's my little friend. It's the Warhamster. He's come from the absolute ass end of the internet and brought me some incredible drama and some insanely silly topics to talk about. And that's what I want to do today. I want to dive in and talk about some a little bit loosey-gooseier stuff. We're not doing list reviews today. We're not doing competitive analysis. We're not jumping into that stuff. Instead, we're gonna invade the most toxic cesspit on the internet. Today is gonna be Reddit and talk about some funny things that have gone down. So yes, he's our Warhamster friend. He's scurried over. He's given us a couple of threads to read through. Gonna be a bit of a shorter stream. I do have a Purple Channel game scheduled in 90 minutes over on Twitch. That's gonna be a Crusade game. Please come hang out with me over there. If you are not, so follow a follower on Twitch already, I will put a link in the chat. You can come hang out with me, and we're gonna play some Crusade. It's gonna be sweet. It's a demon mirror match, which is a little bit weird. My opponent, I think. He's got the tools to kill me, but we'll see if we can fight around it. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, let's hop in and talk about what's going on here, because I've gone through it. I've picked out a couple of very funny threads that I want to discuss. Some of them are recent, some of them are not. And what we will do on this show, assuming that I have time to do the show and that people enjoy the content, is we'll go through some of these interesting situations, discuss them, talk about them. And today, the theme of today is going to be rules questions and rules arguments, because some of these I think are very reasonable rules questions, and some of them are extremely stupid, and some of them nobody knows the answer to, which I think is amazing. So that's what we're going to be hopping into. Have I seen that the favorite Dallas Town player has signed up for LVO? I did see that. So that, yeah, somebody posted that in the chat or in the Discord server. Yeah, I don't. So here's the thing with that, right? FLG should have banned him 2 years ago, right? When the first controversy first happened, and he's coming in and he's doing a bunch of cheating. If you're a cheater at 40k, right? Malicious cheater, somebody who comes in and is like, you know, has a repeated history of playing the rules in your favor. He had a track record already in other events. He did it multiple times in FLG events. If you are a cheater, I don't give a shit about you. I don't care if you want 100 extra chances. You are actively making the hobby less fun for people. This is not something that people do like to make a bunch of money or whatever. It's something people do for fun, and you're ruining the fun for other people. You're not allowed to play in the playground anymore. Get the fuck out of here. FLG at the time had a 1-year ban policy. They would only ever ban somebody for 1 year. Since Jake has taken over as vice president, that policy is gone. FLG will lifetime ban you now. At the time, they didn't, and so what the judge and the TO team decided was a 1-year ban. He has served that 1-year ban. So this is gonna sound stupid, but I don't think it's controversial that he's signed up, right? I think that in the outset he should have been banned. He wasn't, but now he's on notice. If anything else happens, he's gone forever. And I think, because that's what I above all, I think that the judges, while we can criticize what they say sometimes, I think like what they say at the tournament at the time goes. At the time they said 1-year ban. That's fine. Oh, good. So he served the 1-year ban. Now we can put the issue to rest until something else comes up, and then we nuke the site for Morbid. It's the only way to be sure. It's a shitty situation for FLG because, you know, the FLG team currently is most of the same people from the previous, or I would say, you know, 50% of the same people from the previous administration, but now they have different policies, they have a different outlook on everything from when this whole drama started. So Jake and that team inherited this like present issue that should have been dealt with, just nipped in the bud and immediately taken care of at the beginning. And it wasn't, and that sucks. But I don't think now like the guy coming back to play is like that crazy, because like the rule is that he can do that. So you know, we should play by the rules. That's all I have to say about it. I don't think it's that big of a deal, to be honest. I don't think it's a huge issue. So anyway, yeah. So that's what's up. That's what's going on. Anyway, let's talk about this thing. So first up, discussion thread. The local TO gone wild from Insane Ruffles. Playing first ever tournament. So this is 2 months ago, pretty recent. Playing first ever tournament as Necrons. Played TTS a few times previous to your first IRL tournament. Getting reps in Tabletop Simulator before you know if you like the units. Appreciate that. I think that's very smart. Good stuff. Before the start of the tournament, the TO announced some rules clarifications. One of them being that ruins only go 6 inches high no matter what, including the obscuration ruin rule. So essentially, the area above a ruin, further than 6 inches above it, is not line of sight blocking, which means it is possible to draw line of sight to somebody through a ruin. Absolutely wrong. That is a house rule. That's what we call a house rule, because that is not correct in the rules. If that is a rule that you want to use, and it is the TO's, I don't like house rules personally. That is the TO's prerogative to do, right? They're running the event. They're allowed to make the rules. That needs to be something that is specified beforehand. This sounds like it was done day of, and it was a rule that the TO thought it's how it worked. It actually was wrong. Thank you for the follow over on Twitchies. I appreciate that, bud. I will see you over there in an hour or so. Spoiler warning, Opie dies at the end. Yeah. But obviously, this creates huge issues. If your models are really tall, and Insane Ruffles over here is a new Necron player, meaning that he's probably working off of combat patrols, meaning he has fucking Canoptech Doomstalkers who are really tall and skinny. And tall and skinny in 10th edition 40k is actually usually a positive, like, model conformation, because it is extremely difficult to draw line of sight to if you don't want them to, right? You get to some situations where you have like Magnus the Red, where he can draw line of sight in really good ways, and a lot of times that will be beneficial for him. However, it also means that he sometimes has trouble hiding if your ruins aren't particularly good, and he has to use distance to hide, or he has to hide behind terrain features you might not want. A Doomstalker, however, can sit behind like a 5-inch ruin, like a flat piece, and basically just be entirely obscured because it's essentially only a base. So all miniatures should work probably, but it also means that if you make the ruins fucking 6 inches high, you're fucked. That's it. GG. In addition, beginning of 10th, Cryptic Thralls counted as part of the unit and thus could be reanimated with them. I had researched this interaction online thoroughly before the tournament and brought 3 units of Cryptic Thralls to attach my warriors in Lichguard. I wonder if this is old, actually, because I don't believe... Can you attach Cryptothralls to Lichguard anymore? Is that still a thing? I have to look that up. I know they can certainly go into warriors. But I thought that you required a Cryptech. Maybe I'm crazy. Another unit from your army being led by a Cryptech. Oh, this did happen a while ago, he says. So this must have been in Index Hammer. Which is okay, so that's a little bit different. So because now the Cryptothrall rule is, if we take a peek at it, it's that you join with the Cryptech unit, and you attach the unit that a Cryptech is leading in battle formations. Cryptechs lost the ability to join to Lichguard units, which was previously really good because you could take like Orican the Diviner in Warscythe Lichguard that was very popular. You'd also play Shield Lichguard with Technomancers, so they had a Feel No Pain. And basically all the stuff that you do with the normal like Silvertide stuff, you would do to Lichguard, and they would also benefit from like -1 to be wounded, and 4+ invulnerable save like baked in and stuff, and multiple wounds. So it was actually pretty good. However, I guess it does make a little bit more sense that the TO would have problems here, because this sounds like this whole tournament was being run at the very beginning of the edition. I definitely don't. It sucks But the rules, if you play this like right after the edition changes, the rules are like a little up in the air, and the TOs literally may not have known. They should have looked it up because these are not difficult things to find out. But I do understand why they made that mistake. In the second game, one of the opponents called the TO over, thought TacticalTortoise couldn't reanimate with the unit. Showed him the reanimation rules. TacticalTortoise rules saying they could reanimate with the unit. The TO said, I remember seeing somewhere where this was eroded. And therefore, you won't be able to do that. That's insane. Anytime, like, the TO's word is final, obviously, for a judge call. But anytime someone's like, I remember seeing that change, but I cannot find where that's changed. Immediately don't believe them, even if I say that. You have to provide the receipts, my guy. You have to go find that in the actual FAQ document. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Indeed, we're doing it. Sounds like a start time. Yeah, so this was he clarifies here as the beginning time. This just is a while ago, which could be any time. Who knows? The 6-inch red roll already gotten Doomstalkers blast off the board in your games. New ruling was significantly impacting your list as well. Finished the tournament listing all 4 games. Played 4 games in a tournament too. That's a lot. Not saying the TO's rulings cost me the game, so as a new player made plenty of mistakes, but they certainly didn't help. The first TO afterwards told him how I felt. He said, "I'm the TO when I say it's final." Jesus Christ. Suffice to say, I didn't want to play any tournaments at that shop after that. Heyo! Ryan G with the big super chat.
$20 through super chat. Favreddit's opinion is they should do balance updates yearly, except for hot fixes. 3 months is too fast. When brought up 9th was that they pivot to they should TR points changes every 3 months and datasheet changes every 6.
They should do balance updates yearly, except for hotfixes. 3 months is too fast. And 9th was that they pivoted to they should points change 3 months every. 9th was 9th yearly. 9th was faster than yearly, right? 9th was biannual, I think. I want to say. I believe it was every 6 months, if I remember correctly. I don't remember though. 9th was like it did take them a while to hotfix stuff. I'm thinking about doing some content talking about like previous metagames, and 9th edition's like has a really interesting series of those. We could talk about like the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex on release. We could talk about the Drukhari Codex on release. Those are some of the most like insanely toxic codex releases I think we've ever seen. At least in that edition, they were crazy. It took them a while to fix them. Adeptus Mechanicus was fairly quick, because a lot of the stuff was like clearly like unintentional and stupid. There was a bunch of abilities that stacked infinitely, essentially, that never said they didn't stack with each other, and it was like explicitly aura abilities stack with each other, but a lot of other stuff doesn't say that, and so it's like targeted abilities, like basically it didn't say whether or not they stacked. If you were like target a thing and it gets a bonus, and everything in Adeptus Mechanicus was that. So you could have like plus 12 range on your shit, which was like happen a lot of times. Plus 12 range, plus like or plus 6, plus 9 range, plus 3 strength. I think it was like very common, and you had galvanic rifles winning like vehicles on 4s. It was pretty wild because the galvanic field buff was I think like it was like plus 3 range, plus 1 strength, plus 1 AP or something like that. So they were like strength 7, range 39, strength 7, AP 4. You're like, okay. And that got nipped in the bud pretty fast, and then they got hit, I think, like sort of sequentially. But I seem to remember most of the time it took like 3 to 6 months to fix a lot of those codexes. Like Drukhari was really bad for that, because Drukhari was there for basically 6 full months. Being really dumb. Being a TO is so fucking thankless. It's true. Yeah, because like TOs, TOs like you get all the downsides, right, of playing, and whatever ruling you make, like usually like because it's a competitive game, right? There's 2 people who are arguing about something. Like whatever ruling you make, someone's gonna be upset, and so it sucks. And I think sometimes you do get people who are like jaded because of that, where they're just like, whatever, I can't really like care that much because people are just gonna be upset about at me for stuff. So I don't know. Let's see, hot fixes monthly. Hot fixes, I think monthly would be good. Or for balance issues. Like if something's a legitimate issue, right? Like, hey guys, we're currently dying to Death Guard. I think that they could do that monthly, but like restrict it to, I don't know, maybe at maximum 3 factions. Up and down, right? But like we're already in this like situation where we have these changes that need to be made, and, between this and the Death Guard update that we're just
Ryan G donated $5 through Super Chat. Bonus points if it's posted on /r/Warhammer competitive and then they argue that they actually meant their suggestion was for casual play.
We'll have some of that in a sec here, chat. That's coming up. Don't worry. We got that coming. Yeah, FAQ stuff definitely needs to be faster updated for sure. All right, so we head to the next section here. So that's obviously a series of bad calls from the TO. The Cryptothrall thing was like obviously wrong. The 6-inch Druids thing was like a house rule, but if you don't disclose the house rule to players in an event packet prior to the game, if it's not in the event packet, or if it's in the event packet and they just don't read it, like fair enough. I mean, they should have read the event packet. I'm really bad at that, so I always get caught out by like weird house rules. Personally, but if it's pre-disclosed and you just don't read it, like it's not on the TO. But it doesn't sound like that was the situation, which sucks. We have another one over here. Gotta agree on monthly hotfixes. You don't have to wait for strength 26 AP4 damage 30 Ormagons. It's true. When will Tyranids finally get their day, chat? When will we get our 30 damage Ormagons? It has been too long. Here's an Am I the Asshole post. This is 4 months ago from Evening Ad. Local tournament. During my second match, Aspect host Eldar versus Salamander's Firestorm. Me and my opponent had some disagreements, and he got pretty mad. Wanted to ask for your opinions, as I'm not sure I might have been kind of a bad opponent. Oh, no. Consolidation moves and charges. This one's hard to explain, but I'll try my best. My opponent got to go first, and my scouts were pretty out in the open. I knew he was going to be able to kill them regardless, so I moved them within 6 inches of my company heroes, and Vulcan Heston using their scout move, thinking I could use heroic intervention. Fair enough. And well, that's where the problems start. I love this like storytelling here. And let me tell you, folks, that's where our problems began. He used his Howling Banshees, rolled a 10 on a 2-inch charge, only wanted to move a single model into base contact, which I said wasn't allowed, since in the core rules it states, if possible, all enemy models need to move into base contact. That's not what it says. We are already running into a situation here, a problematic situation. This is absolutely not correct. This is a very common misconception, and this is only 4 months ago, so this is a still held commonly misconception. It does not say that you must move every model into base to base, and it does not say that you must move as many models as possible into base to base. It says that when you move a model, it must go base to base if possible, which means, and this doesn't seem like this is the case in this situation, but I think it's important to clarify, which means that if you're in a situation where even if I'm very close to my opponent, however, all of the real estate that would allow me to base has already been occupied by models or terrain features. At the time I make that charge, I do not have to go base contact. However, I must go closer to the enemy, which usually means I just bump forward a little bit. So that is an important thing to consider. This made him pretty annoyed, but he accepted. After he killed my scouts, he used a 6-inch consolidation ability and said he would consolidate the benches to the closest objective, where his Wave Serpent was, and use a strat to embark them. That's almost certainly Skyborn Sanctuary. I told him he couldn't do that, since when consolidating, you have to move on to the next enemy unit, and only if that is not possible can you move into an objective. That's correct. Absolutely, totally right. And you put your company heroes 6 inches, wholly within 6 inches of the scouts, or the scouts wholly within 6 inches of the company heroes, so there's literally no way that the Howling Banshees would not be able to get in. So what happened with this heroic intervention? So he tried to heroically intervene. He only wanted to move a single model base to base, and you said that weren't allowed, so he agreed. And then he just didn't intervene, I guess. The Banshees fight first. I bet he was like, I'll intervene, and the guy was like, oh, well, I just won't go within 6 inches. And you're like, well, you have to. And then the guy said, oh, well, I fight first. And the Space Marine player was like, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. I'll lose Vulcan, and it'll be embarrassing. But if you have positioned your company heroes to heroically intervene, then the Banshees would have to go base to base with them, and then Vulcan would kill them. So, probably good you didn't do that. If he knew he wouldn't be able to use his Eldar move, let's see. So, since he could get base to base with the company heroes, he couldn't move to the objective. He argued that if he knew that, he wouldn't have used his Eldar move. I mean, that's fine. Who cares? I said, that's fine. Consolidation is also optional, so you could just choose not to do consolidate if you don't want to engage a new enemy unit. So, you don't have to kill yourself on your opponent's melee attacks. And he can take it back, but with a 3-inch consolidation. Of course, he wouldn't be able to get into range of the objective, so he wasn't allowed to make the move. He got very mad at me. Said we were going to have a very unpleasant game. My guy, he is just requiring that you play by the rules to which you have both agreed to play. Being such a rules lawyer, I thought I might have been a bit of an ass to point all these things out. And I told him, okay, you can move your unit into the transport. And well, that's what he did. I don't know how you would have handled this, but was I an asshole? Should I have explained things better? He didn't announce his plan, so I thought he knew what he was doing. I also didn't want to fight since he played 40k for much longer than you have. That's embarrassing for him, though. Oh, no. Can we get merch with the rule on it? Which one? Oh, about basing? Yeah. All right, so we already had a bit of an issue. This was yesterday as of 4 months ago. So this was very recent. So somebody who has been playing 40k longer than OP here likely does not have much of a leg to stand on. That now, like 2.5 years into the edition, he does not understand the combat phase mechanics. If only there was a helpful YouTuber who had made lots of tutorial videos about how the fight phase works and how to manipulate it. I don't think there's any of those, though. None of those exist. So, I think there's a good rule of thumb that I often go by, and we used to play essentially play by this in War Machine back in the day, but it was effectively. You never want to get someone on core rules knowledge, right? So like explaining to them how the mechanics of how a situation should be resolved so that they can make the most, accurate decisions, I think is important. Because effectively, when you and your opponent get to the table, you say, we're going to play a game of 40k, and the social contract is that you and I are both going to follow the rules of 40k. If one of us doesn't know what those rules are, you can't accurately make that social contract, right? So realistically, it's helpful to give your opponent lenience on core rules issues. That said, once you get to the needier, grittier section, so things like faction abilities, and obviously that's not the case in this situation. This is all core rule stuff. I think that there is much more of it's much more reasonable to hold your opponent to their decision-making when it comes to faction abilities. First of all, if they don't know what their own faction does and how their own faction works mechanically on the table, that's 100% on them. If you're like, oh, I didn't know that's how my ability worked. Well, I mean, it's not my army, is it? And if you aren't totally aware of what the opponent's army does, the opponent should not be held accountable for that. Now, I don't think that players should make a point of trying to gosh their opponent. I think that that's unsportsmanlike. Right? And I also don't think that you should try to obfuscate information from your opponent. That's simply against the rules because it's an open information game. However, if I'm like, oh, I'm going to use a stratagem over here and like uppy downy my guys, my opponent says, oh, I didn't know you could uppy downy your guys. And you're like, well, I mean, there's only 6 stratagems in my faction. It's not that difficult to look up. So I think in this case, this is all core rules knowledge. And so giving your opponent takebacks, I think, is totally reasonable. Especially because we're not really in a situation here where it's not like a unit of Howling Banshees is going to not kill a scout squad, right? It's not like there's going to be a bunch of additional context that's added by the fight phase being resolved. That will change how the rest of the turn works. If you're like, oh, my intention here was to Skyborn Sanctuary, you can 6-inch consolidate over here and do another thing, then, like, if you specify that and you position your models for it, then it's fine. I think allowing him to go back into the transport would have been tough because of just like where the models were to begin with. What you could say is, hey, if you want to like do something different, like it's mathematically impossible in this situation for you to get your Skyborn Sanctuary play that you want, right? It literally can't happen because your unit has to engage my unit in an opposite direction of where the Wave Serpent or the Falcon or Wave Serpent or whatever they're re-embarking into a Skyborn Sanctuary is at the end of this turn. There's no way that can happen. If you want to, I think the reasonable recourse here would have been to let him take back the Howling Banshee play entirely and say, if you did not want to trade the Howling Banshees for those scouts, I've created a situation with my positioning that has made it impossible for you to do the play that you want, right? If you don't want to go for that play at all, now that you understand how this mechanic is, how this interaction is meant to be resolved, that's totally fine. I'll just put my scouts back. I think that would have been reasonable. I do think that we rolled over a little bit here, trying to giving him like the full take back, but I don't know. But only there was an app where the rules existed. I mean, if only there's an app where the rules existed and it didn't cost like $1 million. All right. The story continues. It gets worse. Battle round 2. He gave his 5 fire dragons the no Overwatch thing from Battle Focus. We love it. Moved them into my Land Raider Redeemer. Only one of them was within 6 inches, which he said was the one with the better gun, the Exarch. Fair enough. You probably disembarked your transport, so your Exarch probably gets to go wherever it wants to. I said, okay, and he just started rolling. Well, I love this conversational tone. And he just started rolling. Well, you know how it goes. He hit and wounded 3 times. Said AP4, I said fine. So 5 up save because of cover. He argued I wasn't in cover because something about 75% model had to be behind the ruin for cover. That's super not true. That is OG old rules. Obviously, we don't know the situation here. It could be that the Redeemer was within the ruin terrain, which meant that it was visible through it, which means you trace line of sight normally. So you are going to be, you're able to ignore cover on that model because you can see it normally. However, if the physical walls of the ruin are physically blocking the position where the Land Raider is, it would gain cover. The 75% thing is so OG. It used to be 50% in 8th edition. Was the old rule, and that has since been removed. And I think it was 50% previously. 75%, I think, was like an old 5th edition thing, but that's clearly wrong. And it's very embarrassing for his opponent to not know the basic cover rules, especially with how important cover is in 10th edition 40k. Like, it's one of the most important mechanics in the entire game. The opponent not knowing these like super basic core stuff is very disconcerting. I'd never heard that before. I told him I would look it up, but he kept talking, saying it's not fair how I play. So I said, just fine. We don't have to argue, even if I knew I didn't have cover. We don't have to argue if I knew I didn't have cover, even though he couldn't see my whole model. I would have just used smoke and got cover anyway. The -1 hit doesn't matter. It's on Fire Dragon, so they probably reroll anyway. He just rolled his eyes and said, okay, make the saves. I rolled 5. Well, I rolled a 5, a 3, and a 1. This is where problems continued. Since he then asked which one of my saves was for the better gun, I said I didn't know. I thought he would roll a weapon within melter range separately from the other guys. He got visibly mad and told me to just redo it. I failed both saves for normal melta and for the good one. I got a 6, which pissed him off even more. So it was the same result. If that's a situation where you say, I've wounded 3 times, but you forget to, you don't declare which one's melta, whatever. You just roll the dice and you say, okay, we're just going to determine which one of these is the successful roll, right? The most reasonable resolution for that, they just re-roll it, which is fine. But the most reasonable resolution for that is just to say, hey, on a 5 or a 6, I'll roll a d6. On a 5 or a 6, a 33% chance, it's the one I passed, right? And if you roll 2 5s, then you do it the other way. On a 33% chance, it's the one that I failed. And it's you just like, you very quickly, you roll randomly to determine which of the dice you rolled randomly. You should roll them all separately, because if your weapon stats are different, you need to roll them individually. That sounds like it was an issue on the opponent's part. Or he just had poor communication, where he rolled all the saves, was like, I wounded 3 times, but he had 1 dice separately or a different color dice, and he just didn't explain to his opponent. That is a problem. It's hard not to get cover. Yeah, I agree. Cover's like almost covers like the state of being, the basic state of being. It's crazy how easy it is. I kind of don't like it. It has artificially depressed the value of AP1 weapons, which sucks really hard. Because I like AP1 weapons, I think they're cool, but it's one of the reasons that like these factions that have mass AP1, AP2 just get fucked in 10th edition. Like it just sucks for them super hard. So I don't know. I don't think it was well considered. I think honestly, a lot of my problems with 10th edition would be alleviated if they simply toned the cover rule. I think it would like I have problems with the survivability in the game. I have problems with the time to kill. I have problems with the variance of the game, and I would say there's like a lot of those issues that get resolved if cover's not quite as ubiquitous as it is right now. I don't think cover should go away. You should absolutely have defensive benefits for being a train, but right now it's so fucking easy. Because one of the opponent's models can't see 1 millimeter of your tank tread, your entire Land Raider gets cover. Go fuck yourself. It's such a dumb rule. It's extremely stupid. Oh man. Would have been filling up rules this whole game. Yeah, that's it's not that so there is like I think there is a little bit of a skill to knowing where rules are located, right? And being able to do it efficiently, right? Where it's like I know that this is a rule, and it's a problem with the edition right now where it's just there's too many individual rules documents, and knowing where a rule is placed is it core rules, is it rules commentary, is it tournament rules, which now can affect some of the core rules, is it in the mission format rules, is it in the balanced data slate? Like sometimes you don't know exactly where that thing is, and when you're in the heat of the moment you don't want to go look it up. It is one thing, like I would say it's probably a very good idea for most competitive players to just go through and read the commentary, even if you don't internalize everything it says. First of all, you'll probably pick up 1 or 2 things you didn't know before, but also you'll get an idea of where to find a rule, right? If you're like, oh, we're having a question about modifiers. Well, I know I read in the commentary that there's a section about modifiers. Now you know where to go to find it, and I think that's a big part of it. So like a lot of players have never done this. They've never gone through and just read the commentary and read the core rules. And it's like sucks. It's like doing homework, but I mean, I like it. I think it's fun, but I'm a fucking weirdo. But I do think it's important because when you get these situations where your opponent's like fighting you on cover, you're like, no. I remember I read this. This is in the ruin rule section, where it says if any part of a model is obscured by this ruin terrain feature, then I get cover saves. Do you not get cover only against the attacking model? No, you don't. No, if any model in an attacking unit does not have full unobstructed line of sight to a model receiving or being assigned an attack from that unit, you get cover against the entire unit. It's the dumbest rule ever. So let's say, for example, I've got 10 intercessors, and one of my 10 intercessors can't see a little bit of your model. If that is the case, when that model is assigned saves, every single one of those saves considers cover, even if the intercessor that can't see me is shooting something else or isn't attacking at all. It's extremely poorly written. I mean, it's very explicit that that's how it works, but it's really dumb. So let's say this happens all the time where you go, oh, I'll move my guys up. They move 6 inches. I couldn't quite get my unit champion around the wall. So he's going to be behind the wall and the rest of them will shoot. And you're like, cool, I'm in cover. And they're like, no, you're out in the open. And my unit's out in the open in front of this ruin. There is no obstructing terrain. And you're like, hold up. The ruin is obstructing from your unit champion. So despite the fact the unit champion isn't attacking, I will still gain cover. It's very dumb. Like we said, it's almost your opponent, the attacking player, has to maneuver explicitly for you not to get cover, for cover not to apply in 10th edition. It's basically it's like everyone has prepared positions from 8th edition permanently. It's crazy. Where does it say that? We can core rules deep dive if we want to. I believe we were just talking about where to find this. I believe that it will be in the terrain section. And I think basically all of the terrain rules, like if rules for each individual terrain feature, have essentially the same wording. Let me find the terrain section in here so I'm not scrolling through. Go the ruin one. So it's in benefit of cover. So here we go. You ready, chat? You ready to not have to run into the situation that our Reddit OP is having in his tournament? Each time a range attack is allocated to any model, if that model is either wholly within the terrain feature or is not fully visible to every model in the attacking unit because of the terrain feature, that model has the benefit of cover against that attack. Note what it does not say here. It does not say not fully visible to every attacking model in the attacking unit, or not fully visible to every model shooting in the attacking unit, or every model, that can see it in the attacking unit. It simply says every model in the attacking unit. So even if half of your unit is doing something else, if that half of your unit can't see you, you get cover against the other half because of a ruin, obviously. That's important. But if we're talking about competitive play, though, every terrain feature is a ruin, which is another thing we'll get into in a moment here. But extremely, extremely dumb. Yeah. Yep. If you string out a unit so one model is behind a wall and you can't see, period, the thing your unit yet has cover against the entire unit? Yes. Yes. Yeah, so if you're like, I'm going to put my one guy on the objective back here, string my unit out, and shoot you with all the other guys, except for the one guy who's on the objective, because the guy on the objective is behind a wall, the thing that everyone else that they have clean line of sight for that's totally unobstructed is attacking, gains cover against you. Yep. Oh, man, chat. It's very bad. Should have the option to split fire in the same target. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that if you... Yeah, it should be from each model. And I think it was written this way to speed up, like, ease of play. So if you're like, well, 3 of my guys can't see, like, your sponson, and 4 of my guys can see, like, your whole model, but, like, only on this angle, the rules are like, just roll them all together. They're all the same. But realistically, how it probably should work, and how this slows the game down, although they did add a bunch of shit that slows it down even further. How it should work is probably that the models, each individual attacking model determines cover independently. And then you just roll in pools, which is the same for Melta. But the problem is it happens way more often, so I don't know. All right. So we're back to the fire dragons. So he rolled 1-6 to save against the Exarch. What a fucking time. Told him I was sorry. Please roll it different next time because if he rolls together, I'm going to assume it's the same weapon profile. Spoiler warning. He didn't and got mad again because he used all blue dice and 1 gray one. Oh, okay. So he did have differently colored dice like we talked about, but he did not explain to his opponent what the second one was for. Yeah, that needs to be explicit. Also, this is here's an interesting quandary of the dice of the rules here, chat. We actually had a discussion about this in the Discord a couple days ago because I was watching somebody play a game and there's a tool on Tabletop Simulator that lets you assign dice to all your weapon profiles and then roll all your attacks together. That is technically not only difficult for your opponent to understand, but also illegal. If you fast dice roll your attacks, you cannot roll another one at the same time. And here's why that's important in this particular instance, especially because these are fire dragons, which means they get rerolls to hit and they have aspect shrine tokens. Knowing in each stage of the attack sequence whether either your Inferno Lance thing or your Melta range guns convert their attacks changes how you could spend either your rerolls or your aspect shrine tokens. Obviously, the rerolls is not that big of a deal, but we do have like the strats in aspect host to do stuff like sustained hits, and you may fish for sustain if you know that your other attacks didn't convert. So it can change the information you get. The stuff where you roll all the attacks together technically should not be done, and especially on the attacking side. Definitely don't do it. Roll all of your weapon profiles separately. That is actually illegal. Typically, it doesn't matter so much because like you're not really doing anything with that. But if you do roll those attacks together and then you try to manipulate them after the fact, no way, Jose. That's not gonna happen. You need to just be like, hey man, if you want to aspect shrine that one, or if you want to fish, or you want to do anything funky that's not just trying to convert the attack, then you absolutely have to slow roll. The other thing too is that for random damage weapons, you can't fast roll the damage roll or saving throws, technically. So if the Fire Dragon player hands you 5 Melta saves, all of those should be rolled one at a time. You should roll saving throw into damage roll individually. And the reason that matters is that as the defender, you shouldn't have the additional information of how many saves that you pass at the time that you go to, if you want to reroll a save, at the time you go to command reroll. And on the Fire Dragon player side, it's even more important because when you decide to reroll damage rolls, you should not have perfect knowledge of all the damage you get. So if you roll, if 4 wounds read through and I roll 4 damage rolls and I roll 1, 1, 2, 6, or let's say 1, 1, 4, 6, right? And I need an astronomically high number. I'm going to reroll the 1s regardless, but do I reroll the 4? If I know that I need, like, the other dice were so bad, I need a higher number to get it, do I reroll that? And that's not information you should have. So technically, rolling all these things together is, like, actually super wrong, regardless. But, yeah. That's an interesting one. Bullish Bat. If the opponent has one guy behind a ruin, all else fully visible to the attacking unit, only the model behind the ruins gets cover. Yes. Yeah, cover in reverse, or cover is always considered to the defending model. So, for example, when I go to take a save, I determine when I roll that save whether or not that model has cover. So, if everyone else is out in the open and my opponent's unit attack me, assuming I can see all those other guys, only the guy inside the ruin is gonna have cover. Because you determine the line of sight from the attacking unit to that model, and if the ruin's blocking it, then he gains cover when you go to roll his saving throw. So it works. It's basically, in almost all cases, it's better for the defender, typically. Yeah. Had pretty bad luck all game. Probably fueled his frustration. Capital F frustration. That's some serious frustration. Barely managed to win in the very end by using a secret mission. Wait, when did this happen? A fucking secret mission? I guess, actually, secret missions 4 months ago, that checks out. It feels like a lifetime ago that we were in Pry Nexus using secret missions chat. But it was not that long ago. Now that we've gone through 2 separate end game stages since then, end game like scoring solutions since then, both challenger cards and non-challenger cards, secret missions feels like it was 10 years ago, but it was actually only like 3 months. Fucking wild. Secret mission. Well, first of all, congratulations on winning off a secret mission. That's wild. After the game, I tried to shake the hand and say good game, and we both should play more carefully next time. He just turned around and started packing up his models. Yeah, it's in some cases, trying to, like, as much as you're trying to be sportsmanlike, it does kind of rub things in if you're like, oh, good game, man. I remember I'm probably gonna do a members video talk about this, because I had like a I don't know, a small, I guess, like a rivalry with a local player when I first started playing, who was maybe the least pleasant person to have playing against I ever experienced. And at one point he won in kind of like a skullduggerous way, or I think he drew, because like we'd added the scores, and then I didn't go for like a kind of a Hail Mary play to score 1 extra point because I thought I was in the lead by 1. And then we re-added and it was a draw. But it was a draw. Like there's some dice that happened. It was like, and he's like just the most least supposed to play against I ever did. And so it was like, it ended up being a draw. And he reset really like enthusiastically because I think he thought he'd lost. And he's like, wow, great game, man. And I was like, motherfucker, you spent literally the whole game actually yelling at the top of your lungs that my army was broken to my face when I was playing like 42% win rate Tyranids in 9th edition, like pre-Codex Tyranids. I was like, this is like the least fun game I've ever played. Don't give me that like fucking great game, dude. And it kind of feels like that energy where you're just like, you have a bad time over the course of the game, and like at the end of the game, you're like, you can say like GG, man, but you know, you don't have to get chummy about it if you like read the room and you determine that it's like, well, he's clearly like not in a good mental state right now. So I don't know. I do feel like you can, in some cases when your opponent's really mad, like trying to go up to them and be like a friend is not the way to go. Just let them cool off for a bit and then sort of come back to the situation. Does the wording of command reroll clarify that it can be used with fast dice rolling? Yes. So there's a common misconception about that FAQ. That's a change in the rules commentary that says that you can use command reroll while fast dice rolling. This isn't a rule. So the reason that FAQ exists is that technically you should never be able to fast dice roll and use command reroll on the original wording, because fast dice rolling has a clause that specifies that if the order of the attacks is relevant, you cannot fast dice roll. And obviously gaining information about how many saves you've gone does make it relevant. So it was a gray area, and that's why they added the clarification that you can fast dice roll while you can command reroll while fast dice rolling. The reason that you have to slow roll, and it's explicitly saves and damage, the reason that is true, if we go to the fast dice rolling rule, is that there is an explicit cutout in the fast dice rolling rules that specify that random damage attacks cannot be fast dice rolled. So it's not a, like, 90% of the time, the reason why the command reroll clarification matters is that 90% of the time, if you're fast dice rolling your saves and your damage, it doesn't matter, right? If I'm not going to do any dice manipulation, the order in which I suffer saves or I resolve saves from a D3 damage weapon makes no difference. And the order in which you show me what the damage of those weapons are makes no difference if neither of us are re-rolling or doing anything. So most of the time, you just fast dice roll it anyway because the resolution's identical and you're just saving time. However, if we look at the fast dice rolling rules, there is this explicit clause at the end that says if an attack is being targeted or being allocated to a target that inflicts random damage, you cannot use the fast dice rolling approach. You'll need to roll the dice one at a time. So it's the last clause here that just says you have to slow roll out. Which is largely important for, it's mostly like that's I think essentially in there for like multi-wound units, like multi-model multi-wound units, like intercessors or something, and you have a random damage weapon, or the 3 wounders is probably a better like option, like a Terminator squad, right? And you go through, hand them a bunch of random damage. You can't roll all your D3s and be like, oh, I rolled 3 3s, 3 guys die. Because they are 3 wounds and I rolled 3 3s, and then we add the other ones together and we do that much damage on the other damage rolls I rolled. No, you can't do that. You have to assign those individually, which means you have to do save, damage roll, assign damage, move on. And allocation action happens after rerolling dudes. Yeah. You can fast dice roll their wound rolls for sure. But that rule explicitly must affect saves and damage rolls. Yep. Rarely command reroll because it's a 1-to-1. Yeah, I think if I were to give like one of the most common mistakes I see from brand new players, and I fucking used to do this all the time. I would command reroll smite damage in 8th edition. What a fucking idiot. Is overusing command reroll. It's like you consider that like you never want to fail anything, but realistically, having the CP available when you really need it for powerful stratagems is going to be more impactful than like not taking one random attack. So, smite to the max, yeah. I remember so explicitly one time I won a game at a tournament, and and this is a totally justified command reroll, but it was like the spiciest command reroll I think I'd ever experienced. And it was like an AP2 shot from something. It was like a Riptide Battlesuit or something onto a Repulsor Executioner. I don't know why this one's burned into my head, but it was 1 5-up save, and I failed it. And I looked down at my opponent's entire army, and I was like, so if I succeed this save, everything in your entire army is shot. I have a Repulsor Executioner on 1. And it was like a 6 or a 5. It was a not very likely command reroll. And I was like, if I have a Repulsor Executioner on 1, which is like so much damage, I was like, I guess I'll do that. And I rerolled it and I succeeded. And I don't know why that one sticks in my head, but I was like, would I do that now? Like, I don't know. Command points are so valuable. And on like a 33% to like on a thing I didn't really need, it was just like a win more. I don't know if I would. But the more, it like basically closed the game at that point, because he not only didn't kill a Repulsor Executioner, it got souped up by Marty's Calgar, fucking killed everything. But Space Marines were so super dumb, and when I was playing, that was 8th edition. When I was playing it, didn't really matter. I could have won with my hands tied behind my back. Rerolled a 6-up one time at LVO into a town player in a similar situation, won the game. If it's gonna win you the game, if you're like 1-6 to straight up win right now, okay. But if it's like 1-6 to beat you by 20% more, you're like, you can save it, It's just for redundancy in case anything goes really wrong later. AOC the tank, so you were 2 CP into it? Jesus Christ. Yeah, it like in before you're like, I smoked it too. So it was like smoke AOC plus command reroll. Let's go. All in. I do not want to die. I will live. I will live. So rounding out our story time here. What a fascinating series of interactions. It sounds like we just need this dude to go back and read the core rules, because it sounds like he has an incredibly the opponent here. It sounds like he has an incredibly tenuous grasp of core mechanics. And if he understood core mechanics, he would have a lot more fun with the game, because he would be able to do all of these things that he wants to do correctly. But instead, like I totally understand this. I just had a situation like this happen at a tournament recently, where you roll up to a situation and you get blindsided by a rule, it sucks so hard. It's such a shitty feeling where you're like, oh, I straight up didn't know how that worked. Like, I had a different concept of the current board state, right? And it's like, it just sucks. But if your opponent, like, calls it the TO or whatever, or shows it to you in writing, you just got to eat it. You know what I mean? And so I understand that's like such a frustrating situation. But if you don't know, right, and you're like operating without like reading the rules, and then you get caught out on stuff, like that's so easily solvable. You just have to read the core rules and understand them. And it sounds like this guy's opponent would have so much better of a time if they just understood the core rules, like from a slightly more fundamental aspect. Nowadays, a 4++ save for 4 to 5 points is a baseline for a CP reroll. Yeah, I mean, you could reroll 5s. I would almost never reroll a 6, but like rerolling 5s in a very relevant situation is a big deal. If you're like, it's like a secondary plus primary score on a 5-up and a unit lives, like I'll probably do that if I have the CP. Although playing demons is really interesting because I'm maining demons right now, because the command point economy is so different, because you always want to go into your turn with one command point floating in your charge phase. So whatever you think you need 1 extra in your charge phase. And I actually think it makes you play better because you don't spend things like frivolously. You kind of like learn to accept the judgment of the Chaos Gods when you're playing Chaos Demons, because they have very little command like point regen. But you always need to reroll charges, right? You 100% need to get all your charges made every turn. And so if you ever go into a charge range without command points in the chamber, you've basically failed. You know what I mean? Or you're like in a position where you're trying to play from behind. And it's so interesting because if you fail the 6 inches charges, you fucking lose. It's so bad. The game's over. GG. So you need redundancy on those. And I think it makes you play more conservative with your command points, which actually makes you play better. So you don't like randomly just like fucking throw away 4-up rerolls all the time. Had a buddy that got accused of cheating because the opponent thought Rapid Ingress could only be used on units with Deep Strike. That one's like not even hard to figure out too. You just it's not like buried in a core rule somewhere. You just look on the stratagem entry. You go to the app. That one's free in the app, and you just search Rapid, and it's there. All the rules are there. You just click go. It's not like you have to fucking chain through a bunch of rules commentary sections or entries or whatever. That one's so easy. One thing is a lot of people not knowing or playing Azure against Index Magicus is how he could blank or reroll multiple saves. Oh yeah, that was big. The other thing too is they didn't realize how a lot of his effects work. I saw Magnus get blown out sometimes, and this almost happened in my game with Tally earlier. Magnus fucking lived on one, that piece of shit, and he almost lost me the game. But Magnus is -1 damage, primary effect, right? The impossible form has never ever worked on psychic attacks. So every once in a while you see somebody be like, I'll shoot Magnus with like my Maleceptor or whatever. And you're like, blam. Oh, I got 3 through. That's cool. And the Magnus player's like, oh, I'll take 6 because it's -1 damage. And you're like, no, you take 9. You're halfway dead, my dude. The other one too is that the blank, because it's a damage replacement effect, doesn't affect bonus damage. So if you're being shot by like a Melta, it works like Catan Shards almost, where they have damage, then you add any bonuses. So you shoot a Catan Shard with a Multi-Melta, and you roll D6 and you roll a 5. They have it to 3, then take 5 damage if you're in Melta range, because the additive Melta damage applies at the end, because it follows the PEMDAS rule. So the same thing happens with Magnus. He blanks the damage, he takes the damage characteristic, reduces it to 0, then you calculate any bonus damage, which also means -1 or +1 or whatever. So you see a lot of Magnus, every once in a while you see Magnus, like, he would eat like a 10 damage like thermal spear shot from a Armiger, and he would be like, I'll blanket take 0. And you're like, no, you still take 3, because you're still +4 -1, so you still net to 3 damage, even if you spend the CP on it. A lot of people didn't understand that either. But obviously the ability, if Magnus was full power and you had him with like 6, or it was what was it? It was 8 Cabal points and 2 CP. He could reroll blank reroll. No, sorry. 10 Cabal points, I think is what it was. I forget. It was reroll blank, reroll for like command reroll, 2 Destined by Fates, because you could Echoes from the Warp the second Destined by Fate back. You could Weaver of Fates for a second reroll, and then I think you could Weaver of Fates off yourself for a third reroll. But it cost literally your whole turn. But Magnus could be like effectively unkillable. He was so silly. Dude, that faction was so cool in Index. God damn it. Thousand Suns are such a pale imitation of their former glory. So stupid. Magnus Tail blanks a D6 +6 attack. Yeah. So he blanks whatever the damage says on the weapon profile. So if we go like, let's go to like a devil fit, or what's a good example? Like a ghost keel. So like this guy, right? If he was being shot by this weapon, let's say he blanks this. For that attack, he turns this effect into 0. So if he's being shot by this gun, For one attack, he can turn one of those wounds that he fails to save against to 0 damage, so he doesn't take anything. The Fusion Blaster, however, or the Collider, I guess, either one, doesn't matter, is D6 damage. So you turn it from D6 to 0, then apply Melta 2. So if it's in Melta range, Magnus, if he fails the save, still takes 2 damage. However, if this, for example, said D6 plus 6, under the damage profile, the damage characteristic column of the weapon profile, he would turn the whole thing to 0. It's only if the damage is added after the fact. What happens when Magnus blanks damage to something with Melta 1? That's a great question. Don't think -1 damage works at Melta at all. I believe it does, because I think subtraction is applied last. So -1 damage is applied after all other effects. But you can never subtract a weapon damage down to 0. So I have a suspicion that it stays at 1. I don't know if there's anything in the game with Melta 1. Is there? Is there a Melta 1 weapon? I don't think so. I think if that was the case, then it would reduce it to 1, I believe. Because damage cannot be normally reduced down to 0. Can't be lower than 1 clause applies. It was set to 0. Yeah, so the setting is a characteristic replacement effect, which is a different, like, it's different restrictions than the other, like, modifiers. I guess we could look it up while we're here. This seems like the theme of the show, so we'll probably do that. Does this show just become the time where we talk about weird rules, like corner case rules, for a really long time? Because if so, I'm in. I'm doing this every week. It's down here. Towards the end of the document. Modifiers. So, after all modifiers are applied, strength, toughness, attacks, and damage characteristic can never be below 1. The exception is rules that specify you change the damage to 0, where that's applied before any other modifiers. So, I believe that the correct ruling is that the Destined by Fate effect can turn the characteristic to 0, but nothing else can. So, if you apply Melta, then hit Impossible Form, the Impossible Form, or if you apply a Melta 1 or a bonus 1 damage, and then Impossible Form, probably like a strat, right, or something, or an ability. If you apply an ability that's +1 damage, then apply Impossible Form, the Impossible Form would not apply because that effect cannot reduce you to below 1. So if the damage characteristic's already at 1. So the reason that the -1 damage effects here, because I saw there was a question in chat about that, is that the modifiers always have a predetermined order in which they apply. So replacement characteristics happen first, and that's why this whole thing occurs, where if you change the damage characteristic, then you apply Melta afterwards. Then you apply division, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction. So Impossible Form, in the case of Magnus, always happens at the end. However, division, like Necrodermis, the whatever the Catan rule is, always applies first, which is why it does not affect Melta. However, Impossible Form will. A little bit of a fun fact there. Ooh. How's that for some knowledge? Yeah, so -1 does affect Melta. Yeah. Ordo Heroicus attachment. Oh, that has an enhancement. Yes, of course. That enhancement rules too. That's like the greatest Inquisitor alive. And it never gets played because literally everything else in that fucking detachment sucks. I forgot about that guy. You get like devastating wounds too or whatever. Oh no, it already has devastating wounds on the psychic guy. Yeah. That's cool. Good stuff. Have we discussed the trees yet? Nope, the trees are coming. Is it tree time? I think it might be. I have an interesting one last post to talk about. This one was very recent. However, was controversial enough that the person who made it deleted their entire account. Which I don't really understand. -1 damage doesn't affect Judicium because you can't go below 1. Well, you can't go below 1 after the modifiers are applied. So, you would add the bonus damage. So you would go from 1 to 2, right? If you're a 1 damage melt to 1, you would go from 1 to 2, then be -1 because subtraction applies last.
Ryan G donated $2 through Super Chat. Summon the Entmoot.
Summon the Entmoot! Buraroom! Chestnut! Oh, good. Many have come. I had a long discussion with one of my good friends. Last night we were playing some Age of Mythology because the new expansion came out, and we were talking about how cool Lord of the Rings is, and we were just vibing about how cool it is. It's sweet. So let's talk about game movement, and I want to talk about this because this is a situation where it never ever comes up in a competitive game of 40k, not even one time, because you always use ruins, which I agree with everyone who says it sucks. It sucks. It's so dumb because Games Workshop physically cannot find a way to write a forest terrain rule that is not absolute fucking dog shit. And here's a good example of why. So this is another one of those things. So I talked about this previously. It was posted in Warhammer community. Clearly not like it's not a particularly competitive, or Warhammer competitive, sorry. But clearly not a very competitive discussion. It's a new guy who just started playing. In my eyes, he's bending the rules to suit himself. How dare a new guy who just started playing not understand the rules implicitly? How dare I take it on myself to teach him? I need some backup to see if my reasoning is correct. There were trees with a base set down right beside a ruined wall that was over 5 inches tall. To me, it was impassable. He could not freely move his models through the trees without physically touching them. I explained that if you need to touch the terrain and you can't move your models freely, you have to go over or around it. I'll ignore the fact that he first took off the trees off the board and moved them about an inch to the right to make space for his base. Classic. Fucking so classic. Somebody even told me, I have some old War Machine videos on my channel, like way back in the day, and somebody was like, I caught one of those because like it got served to me, or I was like fucking stalking you or whatever. I can't remember the context. But I remember watching all of these battle reports where you would, because the terrain was area terrain back in that game, you would put I always set up the tables like nicely. I would put like the templates down, and I would put trees in the templates. And your opponent always fucking takes the trees off. Why do they do that? And I was like, well, because they didn't count for anything. They were purely aesthetic, and people hated them. They were like, I can't move my models here, and I can't see what's on the other side. Like physically, my eyeballs can't see through the tree. So I'm gonna get rid of them, even though it makes the board look way worse. I hate that. I always play with the trees on. As long as I'm not actively moving things through it or like using like measuring around it, fucking keep the trees on. That doesn't have the same. That's different. The interaction is much different in 40k, which is why this discussion is so interesting. He moved them about an inch to the right to make space for his base. Even after that, his base couldn't cleanly fit. He had to put his hand on the tree to get the model through. Now, I don't really understand how conceptually that works. I guess like he was going to knock the tree if he moved the model, which I feel like is actually probably fine, but I don't know. Surely, terrain shouldn't be touched at all during movement, right? I've only been playing for about a year, so I could be wrong, but this seemed like sneaky stuff. It allowed him to move, to avoid moving nearly 20 inches around the terrain and let him get to my unit instead. He also had his Titanic Baneblade come in sideways on the 6-inch reserve line. The base is 6 inches width, but that's not including turrets overhanging. That one is problematic because you do include all parts of your base. If you cannot fit wholly within that 6-inch distance off the board of the side of the board edge, you're fucked. So you have to use the large model deployment rules, which means they come in off your table edge and take a turn off, which sucks really hard. It's okay off rapid ingress, but it's really bad. That's why Baneblades are fucking like trash unplayable. But that's neither here nor there. That's a tough one because it's like, well, I'm like 6.05, is that okay? And you're like, no, not technically. So, you know, I'm sorry, you can't do it. And then it's like an awkward situation, especially if it's a new player. You're like, I know it sounds stupid, but like the extra inch that your model is is actually relevant in this case. So you can't wrap it. Just strategic preserve it. That is a discussion that should have been had previously, though. If you're like, I'm gonna strat reserve my Bane Blade, you'll be like, is it big enough? And then you have a measurement about it, and then you're just be like, I think it's too big. And then your opponent's like, oh, okay, I'll just put it on in my deployment zone normally then. I feel like that's probably what should have happened, but we didn't do it until it's set up, which was probably too late, but that's okay. The real question here is this terrain thing. So there's trees with a base next to a ruin wall. The ruin wall, I guess the ruin wall is relevant because it blocks more movement for the models going through. It looked impossible because you couldn't move your models through the trees without touching them. Explained if you need to touch the terrain and you can't move your models freely, you have to go over or around it. That's true for the vertical elements. It kind of, to a little bit, sounds like he's saying that you have to move around the base of the terrain, but that's not true. You just have to move around the vertical elements. But here's the funny thing about the comments. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people in the comment section. Let's see if we can find some. Who are saying like, well, woods are he posted a picture of the that is a lot of trees. Holy shit. That's super big. Oh, not the exact setup. Okay, good. There's a lot of people in here who are saying that, well, woods are just an area of the terrain. Which is not true. That's like OG rules where basically the three-dimensional elements of a forest terrain feature are not relevant, right? That's what we were talking about previously, where people just get rid of them. They just like actually just remove the trees from the table. However, I'll get on my soapbox once again. Because the game uses true line of sight, every vertical element of a terrain feature is hyper relevant because it has the potential to maybe block your line of sight, which means that they're under no circumstances, and this was also the case previously, however, nobody played it this way. If you had a tree on a piece of area terrain, you had to play that tree like it was impassable because you could not move that without potentially affecting the line of sight of the game. So basically, like technically in previous editions of 40k, nothing should ever have been moved. And that has not changed in 10th edition. So there is like a common misconception that like vertical elements of area terrain features are actually not relevant unless it's a ruin. But that's not the case. That is, so it talks about wood terrain. If we look through the terrain rules, it says that you agree on a footprint. That's the boundary level of the terrain at the ground level, so that you know which one model is wholly within the terrain feature. So you basically put it on a base, right? However, you must use the model's moving over terrain features rules for moving over it, which means, and in the example, they give the example of their own terrain feature, which the models basically construct the area that you're meant to respect when moving through. But that means that you can move over terrain features, but you cannot go through them. And importantly, I don't believe that there is any cutouts for this like there are in ruins. I guess we can look at like compared to a ruin rule. So like the ruin rule says infantry, Imperium Primarch Belisarius called beast models can move through. The woods rule doesn't say that. It simply says use the normal terrain feature movement rules, which I just realized that I am cutting off with my cute hamster. So we're going to go ahead and go to that section, which says you cannot move through this terrain feature unless the features are 2 inches or less in height. This is important as well because this comes back to the OG rule where you check the height of the total terrain feature when you're deciding whether or not it's 2 inches, which means that terrain features with an area with a section that's 2 inches, but the rest of the terrain feature is 6, is a 6-inch tall terrain feature, which means that you actually do have to clamber over the 2-inch sections, which is dumb and stupid. Nobody knows how that works. That's how it works. And I believe that there's explicit cutouts in most terrain layouts to allow this to work the other way. But it's why they had to reword a bunch of like scuttling walker effects to say you can move over portions of a terrain feature of X height. So anyway, that means that when you put a forest terrain feature, let's say you get like, I have 1 million of these and I love them. When I used to stream games, I would put them out on the field because I think they're great. Let's grab a picture. Like you take your battlefield in a boxed forest. Let's grab the picture. My favorite, a most classic piece of terrain from our friends over at who makes these? It's Battle Zone, Battlefield Gaming, or whatever it is. I forget. Battlefront Miniatures. Excuse me. They do Battlefield in a box, and it's a box and it has some trees in it. We love it, and a base. And you say, this is going to be our forest today. You have constructed, essentially, an enormous section of impassable terrain on the battlefield. This is why competitive events never fucking use these rules, because they're dog shit. They're so poorly written. There's no way that this is functional in any way in a normal game, right? So you would have to construct a forest that is a base in one tree. And then you're like, why was this even here? And it gives you cover if you shoot through it. Who gives a shit? And the tree, like my Land Raider can't go through a pine tree. It's like a 110-ton war machine that's impossibly advanced compared to today's day and age. And today, a tank could cut down a tree by running through it anyway. So why can't my Land Raider do it? I don't know. Nobody knows. The trees are made of sturdier stuff, I guess, in the 41st millennium. So this dude who's writing the rule is totally right. The trees must remain there because they're relevant for movement in line of sight, and you can't move them, and you can't go through them. Obviously, the downside is we just have a new guy who started playing, and I tried to fuck them with terrible terrain rules. So, like, nobody comes out well from this situation. You're like, my opponent was trying to play with a fun Baneblade because it's cool, and ended up... ended up not being able to play his fun Baneblade because it got stuck behind a fucking huge-ass forest that for some reason we were playing with. So, like, I don't know. That's the trees thing, chat. Trees are not good terrain in 40k, and it sucks. They should be well situated, but they never have been. Fucking horrible, dude. War game run by the interwar French military. That's... They would never go through the Ardennes, chat. It's impossible. That area of terrain is literally impassable. There's no way. Let's start a petition for new forest and crater rules. 100%. I watched that... I made that video about like my wish list for 10th edition or for 11th edition. And I talked about how I wish they would just allow for like terrain to give different anti-shooting defensive effects. I think it's cool that when terrain is powerful. I don't like the cover rules because they're poorly written, but I do think it's cool when like terrain can give you relevant benefits. So let's say, for example, terrain gives you lone operative if you're wholly within it. Wouldn't that be sick? Wouldn't that be so cool? Now suddenly you need like... It doesn't make you immune to charges or whatever. It's an area terrain feature. Let's say that the trees don't matter, so we can remove them. And they don't have to physically body block all our positioning. However, you're invisible while you're standing inside them. And so your opponent has to either have fast like disruption pieces or fast melee to deal with you. Isn't that cool? But it doesn't give you a free reign to like hop, behind like line of sight blockers and wall screen yourself and all that stuff. It's a very different method of interacting with that terrain. I think that would be sick. But Games Workshop doesn't pay me to write the rules, so that sucks. But anyway, chat, that's the discussion about trees. Trees are a very bad terrain feature in 40k. In fact, basically all the terrain features in 40k are not written very well. It compared to the glory days of 9th edition terrain keywords, we were how far the mighty have fallen. It kind of sucks. So unfortunate. But anyway, folks, I think that's all the Warhamsters that I had to discuss today. This is our first episode of Warhamster Wednesday. Let me know if you like it, and if you do, I will send my tiny hamster out, and he will go find. Look at this little fucking guy. What a goober. He will go find some more Reddit posts and other interesting social media interactions to discuss. Because I think it's a really interesting sort of catalyst for discussion. And that's what's up. That's what's up. If you want to... Oh, I just realized I did errands earlier today and I forgot something. If you want the show to continue, please come hang out with me on Twitch. Get clarification? I did. I'm seeking additional clarification, but the judges from the event did follow up with me, which I really appreciate. It seems like they're super on the ball, and I think, yeah, it was definitely blown out of proportion. The whole situation, I think I might still do a video on it. It's not as spicy as you think it is, but it's still an interesting discussion because I think it's an interesting discussion for how we as a community want to handle pre-game concessions is essentially going to be. Hey, thanks for the follows over on Twitch. Appreciate that. Is I think going to be the sort of the heart of the issue, or the heart of the question. And the answer to that I don't know, but that's effectively what happened. There wasn't money changing hands or anything like that. So I will. I'm gonna see if they'll follow up with me again, because I had a couple of clarifications to ask. If I did, I'll decide if I want to do content on it. But yeah, it was definitely not quite as wild as we thought it was. As it was reported to me that somebody paid somebody else $350 to win a game of 40k, which did not actually happen. So yeah, it's still an interesting thing though. Does the Warhamster have a nice hamster wheel? Yeah, but his hamster wheel is like one of those, the horrifying ones from Warhammer Fantasy, with cannons on it and stuff, you know? So with that, chat, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up things here. So I'll see you all over on Twitch in about 20-25 minutes. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me. Keep it classy, folks. Have happy wargaming, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers, everyone. Have a good one.